Good afternoon, everybody. It is Ed Gow Jr. here. I am a member of the Dad Central Steering Committee in Ontario. And Dad Central is Canada's national fatherhood organization. And I'm joined here by Drew Solon. And Drew is the director for Dad Central Ontario. Drew, how are we doing this afternoon?
Doing well today, Ed. I'm looking forward to the conversation, looking for the opportunity to have it a little more interactive. Have any questions on my and just having a good time.
Excellent. Well, I'd like to thank everyone that's here live and anyone who has the opportunity of watching the replay. We'd like to thank you. We're here to have another, I like to say everything I host is an epic conversation. So I'd like to thank everyone that's on here. We want to make sure this is very interactive for everyone. So we'll be monitoring the chat room. So if you have any questions, comments, please feel free to share your thoughts in the chat room. Drew, we may have some people who have not heard about Dad Central. Could you give a little background about Dad Central, please?
Sure. Well, thank you, Ed. As always, it's a pleasure to bring these events to everyone. If this is your first time joining us, a big welcome. We're really glad you're here today. And I'm excited about this conversation about 5 things every kid needs from Dad. For anyone new, my name is Solon. I'm the director of Dad Central Ontario, also the founder of Connected Dads, which is a coaching and training service for dads. But the role that I'm most proud of is also the most demanding, is actually being a dad. I've got 3 young children. I've got twin 7-year-old daughters and a 4-year-old son. And I've been blessed to be able to come to Dad Central. Dad Central is an organization. We're about promoting positive and involved fatherhood. We've been doing it for about 20 years. And what we've always done is looked at research as the foundation for the type of content that we provide. And it's been the foundation for resources that we give to organizations who work with families. It's been the foundation of how we communicate to dads and how we bring a lot of the grounded information from that research and how dads can apply that in our families. So as I was saying, I'm a dad myself. I need those resources. I also probably need this conversation more than most of you or the dads who are listening. And so I share that to say that parenting is really hard work, and I'm sure all you on the call already know that. The truth for me is I've never been challenged in so many ways like I have as a dad. But the problem, and why Dad Central is around for me and many other dads, is we don't often have, I guess, 3 key things. One is a proper role model to follow, whether that's you've grown up without a dad, whether he was around but maybe he wasn't involved, or maybe you didn't have or don't have a good relationship with your dad now, and he isn't a good example for how you want to parent. Could be second for specific challenges that we face. Me, Dad Central's been around 20 years, and I'm continually meeting new people. Whoa, wow, this is great. I didn't know this existed, but we've been around for 20 years. So people just aren't aware, or there isn't a lot of widespread support because Dad Central is kind of the only game in town for dads. Or third, the time and energy that is needed to actually engage the way that dads want to, they struggle with it. Whether that's because they have other things going on in their life, or there's a lot of other burdens, or they just are exhausted from a hard day of work and they got to get home, and hard to be involved in that way. So these virtual events are really our way to help, as are many other resources that we have available at dadcentral.ca. I think we're really fortunate this year with the help of our partner Dove Men Care. And we're looking forward to support dads be actively involved in their kids' lives. And as we know, it matters so much because children thrive when they have positive involved dads. So thank you everyone for joining this conversation today. We're really excited to have you. But I do, before we get into the conversation, want to share an important concept that I think is very helpful. First, the principles we'll be talking about are from a booklet that's written by Kerry Casey. He's the former president of the National Center for Fathering. There was a lot of research that went into it, and our goal is today to bring it to life through adding my stories and our experiences. The booklet will be available for download after, so you will be able to access it as well. But the most important thing I want to share is the idea that these principles that we're going to be talking about are descriptive in nature versus prescriptive. And what I mean by that is that they describe something that kids need from dad, but how you as a dad or how dads may apply it will be slightly different based on the needs of their unique children. And that's the thing, every kid is different. The most important thing as dads is that you recognize and adapt to your child's specific needs. And so how I apply the principle of my children might look slightly different than other dads, and that's okay. So here's how it's going to work. Ed and I will go back and forth sharing content and generally talking from our experiences and applying or supporting other dads in applying these principles. We'd love for this to be kind of an interactive. So we'd like you to add your comments or ask questions during the conversation in the chat. Many times the stories that people have shared have added a lot of value, either for us in the conversation or just other attendees. So we'd love to hear from you. In fact, why don't we get started by using the chat function right now. If you're a dad and you're joining us, please just give us a hi in the chat. Or if you're a mom or you work with dads and you want to learn a little bit more, give us a here in the chat so we can sort of distinguish on the differences between dads and who's here. Okay. All right, Lane is here. Lazio's a dad. Oh, we got lots of people chiming in. This is great. Tanis, a lot of here's. Helen, Desiree. All right. Brenda, great, lots of people. Okay.
Drew, man, well, they love you, Drew. You just ask them a simple question. They're just on fire.
All right. They're all here. Sault Marie. Great. We have people joining from everywhere. This is fantastic.
Oh.
Ed, Desiree says she can't hear you.
Okay, let me.
I can hear you, Ed.
Yeah, well, I'm loud and clear. Sorry. I tried. I don't need my big mouth, though. I don't want to get in trouble again. He's very low.
All right. Well,
very low. Well, I don't know about being very low, but I will see what I can do with my volume. Is that better, folks?
And the tech is always a challenge. Ed and I were up to the moment hoping that it was going to work out. So thanks for joining us, everyone.
No, I will speak louder, everyone.
All right. Well, really looking forward to it. Thanks so much for giving us a shout out, everyone. We're looking forward to an interactive time, as we said. So, Ed, why don't I turn it back to you, and we'll get started talking about what our daughters need from dads.
Again, and I just like to say thanks again, everyone, for taking time out of their positive, productive schedule. I work with fathers right across Canada. I've been blessed as part of Dad Central to do the passion. A lot of people say it's work, but I call it passion, because if I was working with dads, I'd probably lose the rest of the hair I have on my body because I already lost all the stuff on my head. So it's a passion, and I'm very blessed, and I really love working with dads, because working with dads means you're working with families. We're passionate about dads. You're passionate about families. So the first area, we're going to cover the dads and daughters first. Then we're going to cover dads and sons. And as Drew said, please, let's be interactive. And Drew already got it started. You identified yourselves. And especially when I'm passionate with fathers, I take the stance that the more I know, the more I need to know. So I am speaking it that today someone will share something, will be a light bulb in my head, and hopefully Drew and myself will cause some light bulbs, and also light bulbs will go on interactively in the chat. So the first thing we're going to talk about in regards to...
Ed, can I hop in just for 1 second?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry to end the flow. If you have your video, could you do me a favor and just turn your video off right now? Our goal is just to be able to keep it as the bandwidth as tight as possible, and I know mine's a challenge, so that would be great. Thank you. We'll go ahead and get started.
Okay, there we go. Very nice.
Thank you.
So as I was saying, we're going to start off with dads and daughters first. And the first area we're going to chat about is daughters need words of comfort. And two of the points we just want to share here is that daughters typically feel that they can share with dads because they don't feel unconditional acceptance. And that's from the research that that Drew quoted from earlier. And dads should need to create an environment and relation where daughters can freely express their feelings, feel their dad listens to them, and shows empathy for how they're feeling. Drew, first story.
Yeah, this is one of those areas that as my daughters grow, I learn how important this is and how bad at it I have been as they were younger. And so, one of the things that I've really learned is listening obviously is critical, but the first time or first interaction when my daughters maybe have done something that's less than ideal, or it's not kind of how we've asked them to behave, is critical to allow or open the door for this type of them feeling comforted from me before I even actually get to the words. Because if it's on my face and if it's in my body and if it's just clear that I'm not happy with them, they are automatically so astute and so aware that they start to get into resistance or defensive mode. And so the thing that I've learned the most is that my immediate you know, facial expression, body language, and response needs to be completely calm and completely almost devoid of any type of reaction when something has gone outside of what my expectations are, because they're so perceptive. They see it and sense it, and they start to automatically shift, and they're not as open to me. And so I need to be that have openness first, is what I've learned, because earlier on, something would be outside of our expectations or behavior. There'd be an immediate sort of response from me. Yes, it would be measured, but it would still be, it was evident that there was probably a little bit of displeasure. And so I noticed that over time, they got less and less willing to sort of share with me after that initial reaction. And even if I tried to bring out, well, what was going on, how did you feel, give them that space to share, they were less likely and really willing to do it. And so it's been an important learning for me as my daughters have grown, is that I need to really be completely measured and controlled in response, and really invite them into sharing what's going on through curiosity, through questioning, without any type of preconceived judgment, even if it's pretty obvious that they've done something that's outside of expectations. So that's been my biggest learning, and I'm working hard at it. The other one is empathy. Being able to share or even feel what they might have been feeling in the times when something's gone outside of my expectations, or just to me, I see things very differently than a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old girl. And that is the biggest learning for me, is how do I allow myself to get to the point where I can experience kind of what they might be feeling, and come alongside with them, even if it doesn't logically make sense to me, but I tap into the emotions they're experiencing. So that's kind of been my learning, but I'm also excited because I see the difference now that it makes. How about
Excellent.
you, Ed?
Excellent. And, probably the best example I can give in regards to daughters is I have a younger brother who has a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old. And the 13-year-old, she's a handful. And as I was saying to Drew beforehand, she actually has her own Instagram account, and she also does Instagram stories. So that is a challenge for him, but he always gives her attention wherever, and he always wants to make sure that there's a comfortable environment. And here's an extreme example. In middle of February, myself, my younger brother, and my dad, we were down in Jamaica hanging out. We took a boys trip down to Jamaica, and almost every day on that, well, not twice a day, she would be calling my brother. My little niece, well, growing niece, would be calling bugging him. I want an iPhone X. I want this. I want this. And he's going like, you got to talk to your mom, but dad, the dad. But he never pushed her back. He said there were boundaries, saying, we got to talk with your mother, got to do this. But he always makes himself accessible to his daughter, even though she is a handful, and he knows she's a handful. But she expresses her feelings, and it's very, very important to create that environment as a father, especially with girls, because the girls will get the impressions of men from their fathers a lot of the times. So it's very, very important that the fathers create the time and the space where daughters feel very important. And it's a work in progress. And as fatherhood is, it is a work in work in progress. Sorry. We're never perfect. We just keep on getting better, a little bit better each day. So, and even with the fathers I mentor and coach, the daughters can be challenging to them, but they realize that spending the time with them, investing in them, brings so much joy and satisfaction to their lives that they just become better. And that relationship piece is very, very important. Drew, anything else you wanted to add on to that little point?
I think there's two things that come to mind. One is, I think those are great points you just made. Going forward, my goal is that no matter what circumstance my daughters might be facing, that they feel completely comfortable coming to me with whatever it might be, knowing that what you just talked about, the relationship is strong, and that even if they're concerned that I might not be very happy, they know that I will always accept them, that I will always be there for them, and that I'll always be able to just care for who they are above all else. So that's one of certainly my goals, and I think this is a really key thing that I think will help me do that. The other thing is that Ross had asked a quick question about, I'm wondering about the emotions you may cover up and come back composed to problem solve. And so this has been an learning for me of, one, recognizing what emotions I do have in the face of maybe something that is less than ideal. Am I feeling disappointed that they've behaved outside of our expectations? Am I feeling maybe that I've made a mistake or I've done something wrong and that they should know better than to do what they're doing? I might question, what's going on in terms of, have they not learned an important lesson here? So there's a lot of different emotions that do come up, but being able to recognize what they are is important. But in the interest of serving them, I may not actually come back having all that resolved. I'll come back with the intent of giving them openness and space to allow them to express their emotions. And then I can allow that to filter through, go through it. And then I might have my own time later that night in conversation with my partner, discussing kind of how I felt, what was going on, that may help me process through the overall emotions. So it doesn't always happen that I come back with it all figured out. It just so happens that I come back with a commitment to be composed and create space for them to feel they can be heard. So I thought that was an interesting question I could share from that learning that I've had.
And we want to thank Ross for that comment. And also, we have a question from Helen. And hey, folks, have the questions come in. This is a real good question. And directly and indirectly, it has to do with what we're chatting about today. And Helen is asking, do you think that children using social media makes it hard for fathers to stay connected with them, especially if they're experiencing cyberbullying? In a short answer, yes, very much so. And I think, we're talking daughters here, but I say daughters and sons. You have to create boundaries and restrictions in regards to the use of social media. And you, fathers, need to know, who are they communicating with? No different if it was face to face, especially with our daughters, you want to know, who are they communicating with? Because we know that there are potentially some not too good people online. So fathers need to be involved. And I think the better involvement with the daughter face to face, the better involvement if that father needs to know. So who are you speaking with, etc. There'll be less resilience from that daughter in regards to the social media. And this also goes with sons, that you need to have those boundaries. But again, it's the solid relationships. If the relationship is solid, it creates more trust and more bonding and more openness and more growing. Drew, do you want to add anything in regards to that whole social media piece?
Well, it's like a lightning rod for me. I have a very strong opinion of social media. And we are, I'll use this as a plug, we are going to be running a conversation for dads about protecting our kids in the digital world later on this year, because I think it's a critical one. I think in particular for young women, that social media is a real challenge. And I think so in terms of the staying connected, I think if a father has a strong connection and relationship with their child, as I said, son, it is a significant protective factor for the ills that I think can come from a lot of social media and a lot of social media use. Do I think that social media is, like the worst thing? No, but I think that it presents a lot of significant challenges. In terms of if you're experiencing cyberbullying, well, that's something that the relationship and that ability to come and share is critical to help alleviate some of those challenges from that. So social media is a tough one. We are going to be running a conversation, as I said, later on. And I think it'd be great to go deeper into this topic to help parents and dads in particular understand how to manage those things. But Boundaries, absolutely critical, Ed. I just also wanted to share a quick story about, around this teenage years. It's more from it's my mom's story, but I thought it has some great principles in terms of how to manage things that you may not think that your children should be involved in. So when I was 13 years old, I went out and bought my own CD. I'm not proud to necessarily say this, but yeah, I was interested in it. I bought a Method Man CD for anyone who knows back in the day. The lyrics are probably not something you'd want your 13-year-old son to be listening to because it doesn't really speak to the type of values that were important to our family at the time. So here's what my mom did. She came to me, she said, "Oh, are you okay if I listen to that?" I said, "Yeah, sure, go ahead." Um, so she sat down, listened to it, and then she came back and she said, "Drew, can we sit down and talk about this?" Not that I had a choice. But then what she did is this. She's like, "I want you to know what's in this CD that you've listened to and the lyrics that are part of it." And so she shared with me very clearly, very frankly about what these lyrics are saying and the type of impression that they were providing. And she said, "Those aren't the type of ways that I think that I want you to behave, and those aren't the types of attitudes or values that we have as a family. So I want you to know, this is your CD. You can listen to it if you so choose. But I want you to know that these are the things you're listening to, and I think that it would be a better choice if you chose not to, but it's yours. You can do with it what you want." And she left it to me. Now, that takes a lot of courage, and a lot of people are like, "Are you crazy? What's going on there?" But the reality is she recognized that I was a person who had ideas, who had thoughts, but also had the ability to make my own decisions. And so in that moment, she was telling me, "You've got a choice here, and you need to learn how to make decisions. And here's how you make decisions." And so I thought it was an interesting story I'd share with as far as, but it involved being open to your child and allowing them to share what they were going through.
Great story. And um, Greg's got a good add-on question. I don't want us to spend too long on it because we still got to get through some of the conversation pieces, but I don't want to ignore it. Greg is saying, I guess related, at what point do you introduce social media, or is that more of a thing they get socially? I think that's an individual situation there because your daughter is only 2 right now. I guess my question back is she wanting to get a phone or want to communicate online? And I think that's an individual family decision. Like, Drew, what do you say? That one, I think the parent or the father really has to know what's going on there because that at
Yeah.
2 years old, wow.
Well, I think he was just indicating that his daughter is 2, but as he thinks about her future, knowing that social media is going to be probably part of her experience growing up, what's appropriate age? For me, I have a very clear idea. I said jokingly to my daughters the other day, "You're not getting a phone till you're 18." But I'm sure many parents are like, "What?" Look, in terms of this, my personal opinion is that until children are really, I think teenagers, they don't really understand what's going on, and they don't have the maturity to be able to make decisions. As you help them learn and grow and develop maturity and understand decision making, and when you make a decision, how that correlates to a potential ramification or results of that decision, that I would never expose my child to that significant amount of risk until I feel that they're at that maturity level to be able to make decisions. And I've seen the pattern of making good decisions around something as significant as social media.
Okay. Just going to add really quick because we're going to move on to our next point. But Don is saying kids are going to communicate online, starting with Google Classroom and Google Hangouts. Yeah, you got a point there. And Helen saying parents having an honest and respectful dialogue gives their children's alternative perspectives without dictating their choices. So this is a sort of conversation we want to have. Myself and Drew only know so much. Everyone has some value they can bring into the conversation. So please keep on doing that. That's what we're here for, so we can get better together, so we can get better for dads and for the families. Number 2 point, we have daughters need to know you think she is beautiful inside and out. Dads have a huge influence on their daughter's self-image. The pressures to meet culture's unrealistic definition of beauty can be combated by dads who affirm their daughters are unique, beautiful, and highly valued. Dads should not criticize their daughters, body shape or appearance. They should also affirm their daughter's non-physical positive attributes, express healthy, positive affection, get involved in their interests, and show confidence in your daughter or daughter's abilities. I think this is a very, very huge point, and sometimes dads miss out on this, that their daughters, your daughter or daughters, are looking for that love. They're looking for that affirmation. You are the major man until they grow up and go on their own way, the major man in their life. So they need to get that positive affirmation, not only the physical beauty, but, doing well in tests, helping out, helping around the house. That builds their positiveness inside. And that inside will come to make them be better on the outside. That is one thing I really, really stress with fathers that I mentor, especially when it comes to the daughters and sons. But the daughters, a lot of times they don't feel valued. So it's up to the fathers that I mentor to take the lead in that. And sometimes I have to educate them and say, hey, did you receive that love when you were growing up? And if they did, great. If not, we help them and coach them and mentor them, especially when it comes to showing love to their daughters. Drew?
Yeah, this one is, I think of it from a place of what my challenges are with this. And so I just share a little bit from that. I recognize how important this is, yet sometimes, you know, I don't struggle in terms of showing physical affection to my daughters, and I think that's a really important one, right? Hugs, just hands on shoulders, all the appropriate ways of physical affection. I think I feel pretty comfortable with. That's just my nature. But in terms of the affirmation with the positive words and speaking things of how beautiful they are, both physically, but also in terms of their character, in terms of their strengths, in terms of the attributes that I see developing. I notice them, but I don't always verbalize it. I see them and I think, wow, that outfit they're wearing, they look beautiful, or how they treated that person was really wonderful. And so the big challenge for me is to find ways to, in the moment, or just intentionally affirm the things that I see in them is something that I always want to continue to get better at this. Because I think what it does is it does begin to give them a sense of that somebody who they hopefully has a strong influence and cares about them, sees them for how they are, both physically and otherwise. And so it's something that I want to be better at, but continue to recognize there's an element of me that I just see it and I notice it, but I don't go that next step. And so I think there's probably other dads out there who are like that, or they just maybe never experienced it or are uncomfortable. How do I say it? What do I say? For me, I've learned a couple of different things. One, being very specific about what I've observed is critical. So if it's the way that they're treating somebody else and they've shown a lot of kindness, or they've shown a lot of patience, or they've shown a lot of determination, characteristics that I think are really great, I'll say very specific. When you were dealing with your brother there, you were really patient in waiting for him to finish what he was saying. Those are the things that I've found. So being very specific. Obviously, it's got to be genuine, right? I'm not going to just use flattery or use fake words because it won't land. Everyone can sense that. And so whatever I do notice and feel, I want to share it because it's very genuine. And the other thing is repetition. I've learned repeating the same message of what I appreciate in them over and over and over have been the ways that those three things have helped me to be better at that process.
And it's interesting what you said there, Drew. And one thing I just want to add on to that, especially daughters, they know if you're being real or not. They know it. So be careful. And even from a young age, girls will know if you are being real or not. So if you're going to say something of affirmation, be genuine. And also like the point that Drew said there, be repetitious. Don't make it a once in a while thing. Make it a consistent thing. Make it a consistent thing. Affirmations, words. Words are so important. And the words, and combined with your body actions and those affirmations, like hugging your daughter and saying, Dad, I love you. That's words, but it's also back with actions. That is strong. That is a really strong attribute. So that is a really key point. Let's move on here and keep the comments coming in. And I see a comment here from Ross, if you can just say it again, we're not completely clear on what you wanted to mention your comment, but we still have some time for you to put up and we can address it.
And Ed, I'm going to hop in if that's
Yep.
okay. Two quick things that we talked about: getting involved in their interests and showing confidence in our daughter's abilities. I think those two are actually easy steps that anyone can take. So if my daughters are interested in, let's say, horseback riding is farthest from my interest. But by me showing interest in what they're interested in, I'm actually affirming the fact that their interests have value, and that matters to them. And then this idea of showing confidence in their abilities. As kids grow, you know that there's certain limitations they have. But what I found is when I'm able to impart, hey, I know you can try this out, or things I used to say to them when they were on, let's say, a playground and they were developing, I'd say, I know you'll be able to do that. You're maybe not quite yet ready for it, but I know you'll be able to do that, in terms of their own physical development. But I think showing confidence that they can do things is another way to help just affirm them, and that they have value.
No, and I agree with that. And showing that confidence and, believing them. And even if they don't hit that goal, reevaluate and see what you can do to help them reach that goal. That is just so key. And and showing the belief that you're proud of where she got to. If she didn't get to where she wanted to, okay, let's strategize together and say, how can you do it, honey? I know you can do it. And again, let them take the initiative. You're there to help and guide. Ross, thank you for clearing that. Now you say we store real life situations, so when we are building them up, we can use, like you're saying, real life situations. Great point. Great point. Excellent. Thanks, Ross. The final point we're going to chat about in regards to it's in regards to daughters need fathers to create positive vision for their lives without placing expectations. So how dads speak to their daughter or daughters and the things you say to them have a huge impact on how she sees or they see themselves. Speak out their strengths, help her see what she's good at, give words of hope and encouragement, support her dreams, prepare her for future romantic relationships by becoming the right person versus looking for the right person. And then finally, dad set the expectations for how others would treat her. Are you treating your daughter how you want others to treat her? And I think that came up a little bit earlier when I mentioned that when you are a dad and you are raising girls, you are setting their expectations and their boundaries and their thoughts on who they should be with in the future. So you want to make sure that you're setting the right example, you're setting the correct example, you're giving them hope and reinforcing the right, I don't know if this is the right word, expectations or standards in regards to who right people are for their lives. Drew?
Yeah, and those are all, I think, very important points. And as I look through the four different things, they are as simple as just simply daily statements, when you see your daughter doing something, or they're also much bigger things, such as we are setting the expectations for others would treat her, and so we need to model sort of what we're looking for. So that question of, am I treating my daughter how I'd want others to treat her, always gives me pause. It causes me to stop and think, what if someone else responded with that, maybe impatience? How would I feel watching that? I would probably be a little bit concerned because I defend that. So that one's deeper and challenging, and that's kind of moment by moment, but requires a lot. And so back to this idea of affirming things, it's been a growing area for me. The thing that I also know is important is speaking out strengths. But the reality is day-to-day life of parenting, sometimes, it's just enough to get through the day, let alone be able to say, how can I figure out what my strengths of my kid are? And so I don't want people to feel that, man, this is challenging, but you know what? If it's just something that occurs that is a strength. So one of my daughters, she's super organized, right? I just see her do that. So it's more about noticing, and then when the time comes to be able to then share that in a way. Every now and then, what I've written them short little notes. I remember Valentine's Day, we had these little Valentine's Day cards, and what it is, I wrote a short note that basically said, here's one of the things that I love most about you, and here are the key things where I see you display that. And so just using those moments, and it's not always just in my words, but in little things like that have been helpful for me to be able to apply some of these things. And so it's this idea of vision is challenging, I think, in terms of, um, it is, but what I've found to be valuable for me is just speaking out a real positive, what their future could hold. And I know it doesn't happen very often for the kids that are my age. So sorry, my daughter's age. But as I think our daughters grow, there's a lot of doubt, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of insecurities that come up, and dads have the ability to speaking positively in terms of, you can do it, I believe in you, I know that your strengths in this and this will help you be successful, because the difficulties will come, but still being able to be positive through that and giving them a sense of how they can overcome it, I think is really important.
I fully agree with that. 100%, 100% on what you just shared there, Drew. Very, very important. So, folks, we're a little bit past, well, a little bit more than past halfway through. So, we're going to pick it up a little bit, but please keep the comments coming. That's what's making this a success. And thank you, everyone, for staying in and staying on. Appreciate it. We're going to flip it over to the boys now. So, the first thing that we're gonna put out there in regards to sons needing from their dads is they need a role model. Fathers, it is so important for your sons that you set an example for expressing emotions responsibly. Be vulnerable, share your feelings, open up to your kids, learn to regulate your anger and other negative emotions. Model respect for all people, especially women, and model healthy behaviors and attitudes. I know Drew and I can both share on this one. Drew, do you want me to start on this one?
Yeah, Ed, I'd love to hear your stories on this, please.
Yeah, well, so many different things. I can use some of my own experiences, but I think I can use my dad through a lot of this. My dad very rarely raised his voice to anybody. And his circle of friends, his male friends, they had a good time. They never raised their voices. They were just a really strong group of individuals. And interesting, my dad is my greatest role model. And a few years ago, I asked my dad, I said, Dad, you taught for 38 years in the same public school. Like, how could you do that? How did you get up every morning, drive an hour downtown to Toronto, drive an hour and a half back? And he said to me, I had to take care of my kids. So that, like, his main important thing was his kids. And well, he showed it to me, showed it to all of us kids. That was his number one thing. His role model was family first. Now, he had his moments, but he would say he was sorry. And I know that with some fathers that I work with, they didn't have the greatest role models. So I know that there's a number of service providers here. I always say that, and I say it in other conversations, if you can develop that relation with that father, find out what kind of role model their father was, and that may help you get closer to them being a great role model, if they're not right now, to their sons. Drew?
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that, Ed. Great story. Obviously, you've had a really powerful father influence in your life, and that's awesome to hear. That commitment, that dedication, and that recognition of it's for my kids, and that's what inspires me to do that. And so, I think that I know that most dads have that inside them. With whatever reasons going on, whatever challenges they're facing, doesn't necessarily provide the opportunity to necessarily live it out in the same way. But the one learning area that I'll share is this: expressing emotions responsibly is a challenge, especially if you've had a difficult past. And I've had a challenging past, and sometimes I was surprised by the things that came out because I didn't realize they were there. And so the challenge, I think, for dads is that expressing the fact that there's something inside that you are either unsure of, or it's even scary for you, is challenging, and it often comes out and is seen to be anger is most often the emotion that's seemed to be acceptable for dads. it's not acceptable for dads to express some of these other emotions, based on some of the cultural and societal influences, which is really misguided because we are created as emotional. If you believe in that, we're created, but we do have two sides to us. We're emotion and we're logic. And when we don't manage those or express those emotions or acknowledge those emotions, it becomes challenging. And I think, as we had, back in our How Dads Can Raise Resilient Kids talk, Doctors John Olaf, Dr. Andrew Howlett talk about the value of being able to be vulnerable. John shared a very powerful story of a father who was expressing significant regret over not being able to be vulnerable with his own child. And unfortunately, that was a tragic story. But it's a great example of when we as dads can model vulnerability, showing these other emotions, showing that it's okay to feel, fear or hurt or disappointment or sadness. It's actually strength, and you're helping strengthen your children because they're seeing that there are real emotions and that it's okay to have those emotions. And so it's a hard one, I think, for a lot of dads, especially depending on their backgrounds, but it's one that I think is really critical. And when you do that, you prepare your children to be more resilient, as we talked about in that talk. You prepare them to be, be able to handle more difficulties, and do it in a positive way. You're also helping yourself be healthier as well if you're able to do that. So that one's a big one for me. And of course, your example is a great example of what dads can do and how to do it.
Yeah, it's and for me, when I'm sharing about this topic, it's for some dads, it's like walking on a tightrope because they don't want to show the vulnerability, but they still want to be strong. But
Mhm.
your kids want you to be honest with them. That's what they want first, because again, we're talking about sons here. You're raising men of the future. So as there's a gentleman, Glenn Barker from the Mankind Project in Chicago, he says when it comes to children, male or female or in between, they emulate what they replicate, or they replicate what they emulate. I think it's replicate what they. So remember, from the time they come out of the womb, they're watching you, Dad. Boys are watching you. So please make sure that, and you're not going to be perfect. And when you're not perfect, admit that, as Drew said. Fathers need to admit that they're not perfect. Next point, fathers need moral and ethical benchmarks for their sons. And when it comes to establishing what behavior is right, you should know the right examples and hold your children accountable when they don't demonstrate the right behavior. Intentionally look for opportunities to teach and proper moral and ethical behaviors. And I think with this point here, I'm going to let Drew start off, and I like the word intentional. It has to be intentional. It has to be purposeful. But Drew, I'll let you start off on this one, and I'll join in after you share on this.
Yeah, one of the stories that stood out to me as I was reviewing Carrie's book is the example of um, a father who actually got involved with community service events with their child, and so and part of that was they wanted to, one, model it, but two, they also wanted to talk about the value of service, the value of caring for other people, the value of helping those who need some support. And so he's setting a moral benchmark there in terms of, as a person, this is how you behave, and I'm doing it with you, but we're also then going to learn and talk about it. What have you learned? What are the experiences that you've had? What did it feel like to be there and serve those people? And so I think that the idea of, it doesn't have to be talked about. We'll say it's important to talk about that, but it's as a you've many have heard this statement that much more is caught than taught. And so, which ties it in very nicely with number one being the role model, is that if we want to set these moral and ethical benchmarks, we need to demonstrate them in our own lives first, and to be able to bring our children alongside. And so, by living those things out, it's really important. The other one here that's, I think, really valuable is this idea of being held accountable. I know this gets into more of maybe what could be seen as a disciplined conversation, but accountability I think of as boundaries, right? And when you have a healthy boundaries, you have clear expectations, you have sort of routines that are established. They help support the idea of accountability, because when you know that where the boundary is, and all of a sudden you step outside the boundary, there's an accountability to, well, we need to repair or we need to correct because we've gone outside that boundary. And I think those are the boundaries piece. I think I like that phrasing and that terminology as opposed to necessary discipline, because I think discipline, there's a whole lot of debate on discipline and how to discipline all those other things. And so the boundaries piece, I think, is important for establishing accountability, because once those boundaries are there, you step outside of it, it becomes easy to move through that.
I will just say, and I'll keep it somewhat quick because time is running very fast, that in regards to this area, my dad raised me and said, I don't care if you're a garbage collector, I don't care if you're sweeping the streets, always treat people with manners and respect. And I think that's a good foundation to have, fathers to your sons. Always treat people with manners and respect.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and it, I'm going to say it, these days, we don't see it as much as we should.
Yes.
But when your children display it, believe me, people will say, you know what, Dad? You did a good job. You did a good job. You know, those little things, the manners and respect. And let's, I I think it's an important thing to set those boundaries. Yes, please, thank you. Those little words, you're welcome. Those are some basic things that a father should be teaching their son from a very early age, because that will earn them respect for many, many years to come. I think it's very, very strong. And I know I deal with fathers who they don't even say it to themselves or to other people, but they do need to emulate that for their sons, so those sons can replicate it for many years to come. And I like the fact you intentionally look for opportunities to teach. So if there is something that is done right or not done right, as much as possible in the right and proper manner, do it right there in real time if you can. Not always you can or can't, but if you can do it in real time, that makes a heck of a lot of difference, because kids' minds think fast, fast, fast. And for some of us, we're getting a little bit slow in the mindset these days. But if we can address it in real time, I think that just makes a stronger impression, positive impression on the son or sons that fathers have. Last point we have, and this can be very challenging with dads. Dads need to show their sons love. They need to affirm their sons, show physical affection, and speak words of encouragement, as good communication is crucial to this and all relationships. They need to connect with their son, look for their ways to do things together, and bring up important conversation topics during activities you both enjoy. Look for cues when your son is ready to talk, and be available when the time comes. Showing affection, roughhousing, and play help boys develop a healthier self-esteem and gender identity. Verbal affection is also important. Drew, do you want to start off on this one? I can start if you wish.
Yeah. Okay. I'd love to hear another one of your stories. This is a treat for me because I haven't always heard them. So this is great.
Okay, it's about a year and a half ago at the Fatherhood Center I do work out of. Gentleman came in, and the majority of fathers that I help weren't as organized as this father was. He had limited access to his children, but the nice thing is he had two boys. The nice thing is that he was working his way out of debt, had a game plan, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, so when you have access to your sons, what do you do? Well, I just sit there and look at them. I'm going, really? So I said, why don't you do this? Why don't you ask them what they want to do with you? I said, wow, I never thought about that. And he opened up to me more, saying like he was, he grew up very introverted. Dad didn't show him love. And then when he came back the next week, he comes through the door, big smile on his face. I go, what's going on? He says, I asked my boys what they like. We went out, got a PlayStation, and we played all weekend long. PlayStation, and it was like 180 degrees from the week before that he came in, that that knowledge that he had, and then he was able to show that love, and we went out to the park and this and that, and that, it really, that I'll never forget that story, just to see in 1 week an 180-degree turnaround, and just asking his sons, what do they love to do? And he, one of the things they say is, find the need and fill it, don't find the need and kill it. And he filled that need, and the results were amazing. So just a story I wanted to share.
Yeah, that's great, Ed. And such a simple but powerful conversation point or question you asked him, and said, "Would you try this?" And so sometimes that's all it takes, to be able to, have a dad who really wants to, but just maybe isn't thinking about it, and ways that you can bring it about in that conversation. Obviously, it's in the confines of a relationship you'd establish with them, and there's trust there. And so that's, I think that's really powerful, and a great example of what you can do. This one, again, I think of dads who have a different backgrounds, different experiences. They never experienced it. I've heard many stories from dads who are like, my dad, the only interaction I ever had with my dad was because he wanted me to do stuff, and he never didn't hug me, didn't tell me he loved me. The first time I heard my dad tell me he loved me was, like at my mom's funeral or something like that, right? You hear these stories. And so, I think in hearing these dads or these men share, there's always a big gap, or there's a big void. They wished that their dad would have shown more affection. They wished they would have known how their dad actually felt about them. And so there's those elements there. One of the things that my mom remarried, and I had when I was 10 years old. So my stepfather, one of the things that he always did, that to this day I can, it's almost like I experienced the feeling all over again, is, he would simply put his hand on my shoulder or put his hand on my head every moment, and he would call me like this nickname. He'd call me Sport or whatever, right? And so just that simple act was an affirming act to me, and it, even now I experience the positive, feeling from knowing that somebody cares about me enough to simply put their hand on my shoulder and call me a positive name. And so it doesn't have to be significant, or it doesn't have to be big, but those little moments are ways that we can show we love them, but also that's how you love others, by showing some small acts of kindness, of generosity, of interest. The other point that's here is, as sons grow older, we know we have less and less opportunities to maybe interact, but those times that interact are still quite important. I have a good friend who's got a teenage son, and he does drive him to school, but a lot of times they're driving to school and the teenage son is not interested in conversation. And so the point here is that when you do things together, you can be interacting, but you also have opportunities to maybe venture into a conversation about something that's really important to you, or to invite him into a conversation about something that's really important to him. And I think that those moments, it actually demonstrates how much you care about them. Because if a dad is like, oh, my kid's not going to want to listen, he never wants to have a conversation, even the act of asking or inviting the conversation is communicating love. And I think it's easy to miss that and say, well, he's interested in this, I'm not even bothered. But just asking or inviting or saying we want to do this communicates that love, and that's powerful too. Ed, you're on mute. Not sure how you did that.
We're coming up to the top of the hour, and we've got a few questions. We're going to try to handle them as quickly as possible, because we are cognizant of people's time. So first question here, Helen asks, do you think gender roles affect the way fathers choose to bond with their sons? Want to touch that one first, Drew, or do you want me to hit that one?
Well, I think it's a good question. I'm not 100% sure of what Helen's really getting at in terms of gender roles. But I know that there is definitely a difference from my perspective, just from me, as far as interacting with my son and versus my daughter. Is that because of my unconscious bias? Is that because of my upbringing? Is that because of my own thoughts and perspectives? Probably. And so I would imagine if you're asking from the perspective of, if how a dad sees their gender roles, and the roles of genders, will it affect how I might bond with my son? I would say yes, it probably does. But again, it's without much context or understanding of where that question is coming from. So it's a difficult one for me, but I believe it absolutely does have some influence for sure.
Okay. In lieu of time, we'll go back and forth in regards to the questions that have been asked here. So I will handle this one from Kim. How can grandfathers be the role model when the dad is not in the child's life? I
Mm-hmm.
think I think that is a huge piece, because one of the things I really, really am an advocate is intergenerational communication. And I'll be transparent. My grandfather, my dad's side, I met him when I was really young, and I never met him again. And my brother had a chance to meet him before he passed away. I didn't. Grandfathers, they may not be able physically to keep up with your young ones, but they have wisdom. They have evaluated stories. They have evaluated experience, and they've lived a whole pile of things that your son or daughters or both need to hear about, because that's living history. Now, they may not always be there, but most of the grandfathers I know, they love the grandchildren immensely. And most of them I know they show true love and care. So they may not be able to 100% replace the love that a father can give, but grandfathers and most grandparents absolutely love their grandkids. So just that environment of love and that showing of love can make a positive impact in a child or children's life.
I'll add to this that I think it goes even beyond grandfathers. It can be any male role model. I think of, yes, I was fortunate to have a stepfather who came into my life when I was 10, but I also had other male role models who have played a significant positive influence in my life. And so I think of coaches in particular, because I was involved in sports, or just other men. So my mom was involved in a different community where there were other men who would, they took me and two or three other kids. We went out, we went go-karting. We did little things like that where these men were investing in me, and I saw them, and I still have fond memories of these positive role models from these other men who were involved in my life. So I think any male has an opportunity, if they're involved in the child's life, to be, I'll say, a father-like figure. They can't replace the father, but they can be a father-like figure and invest some of these things into the child.
Very, very, very true. Even at this age and stage of my journey, I have mentors. Some of them are older, some of them are younger. So there is a place for mentors. I don't like saying role models. I like saying mentorship with our sons and our daughters. We have probably time for one more quick question, because we're almost at the top of the hour here. How can mom support when the father son daughter relationship is broken? Want to touch that one, Drew?
Sorry, say that question again. How could
How
the
can
mother
mom
support?
support when the father son daughter relationship is broken?
Yeah. Well, I will speak to this because I think that was my experience growing up.
There you go.
My mother really had to sort of step in and support that. So um, two things that my mom did that I think are powerful. One, she identified the strengths of my father and spoke of those strengths to me as I grew. She would say, I see you demonstrating this particular skill. She says, and she'll say, your dad was really talented in that area. And I can sort of see where you're getting that from. It didn't replace the fact that I didn't have him in my life. It didn't replace, but what it did is it created a positive association between me and who I was and who my father was. I think that was really powerful. Two, she also spoke generally, not that spoke a lot, about his positive attributes as just an individual. She recognized his strengths, spoke of his strengths, and validated his strengths openly to me. So I think actually now there's a third I can add. She also shared experiences from the past or stories or even things that he would have sent me or that were part of our history that demonstrated his love and care for me. So I had some frame of reference that indicated that the father was there. Now, whether my dad was doing those things or not, what she was doing is she was creating a positive association for me with my father, and in a way that I would view, that I would see strengths. So I think that's something that a mom can do is, everyone's circumstance is different. My mom's was, she had a choice to make. She could be bitter, she could be angry, she could be resentful and, try and tear him down. Or she could choose to help her son see the positive attributes and associate positively with a male role model. So that was her choice. So I think moms can, I'm biased, but I think my mom was an amazing example of how to do that. So that's my perspective.
I'll just add to that I think that have good community, have a good village. That I think would be my final point in regards to that, because it's not easy raising a young person by yourself. Even it's not easy when you have two people involved. So if you have a village that cares about you and your son, daughter, your family, it makes the challenging part of parenting easier. So I will leave on that point. Drew, final words and how people can find out more about Dad Central.
Sure, Ed, give me 1 second. I want to pop something in the chat for people so that if you are still on, we would love to get your feedback on the event, what resonated, what didn't, any suggestions as we move forward. And so the other thing I want to share is I alluded to earlier that we do have a great lineup of events planned for the fall. We're looking at one a month, August, September, October, November, and even in early December. So please keep an eye out for these announcements. Share them broadly with your networks or with other dads. I just want to remind everyone that you can get free resource downloads, a directory of dad-related programming and information about all things related to dads at dadcentral.ca. You can also connect with us on Facebook or YouTube. The other thing is, just thank you so much for your continued interest and support of these events. Our goal is to reach as many people as we can, to support as many dads, as many organizations who support dads as we can. So please just keep spreading the word. Looking forward to it. With that, I think I'll just wrap up and say thank you very much to Dove Men Care for their partnership and their goals of seeing dads more actively involved in their kids' lives. It's something, that's why we're partners, because we have the same goals. Thank you to Carrie Casey and the National Center for Fathering for providing these great resources for dads. It will be available as a download. And from my perspective, thanks so much, Ed, for your continued support on these events, leading these conversations and engaging. And it was great to hear more of your stories today and more of the background and the things that you bring so much value. So thank you.
My pleasure. And Drew, there's one last question. Sherry is asking, where will the link be found for this recorded session?
So if you've registered, and since you're on the call, you will, we're going to actually email it out to everyone. So as soon as, probably in the next, I'd say 2 hours, you'll probably get an email with the link, in addition to a link for the survey to watch the replay. And everything can always be found at dadcentral.ca, and navigate to the live talks tab, and that's where recordings will all be found as well.
All right, excellent. With that note, everyone have a good rest of the afternoon. Enjoy the summer. And I say this to everyone, give yourself grace. Bye-bye and have a great day.
Great way
Thanks
to
for
finish.
stopping
Thanks,
by.
Ed.
Bye-bye.